Cool. Hi, everybody. My name's Jake. Everybody say hi, Jake.
Hi, Jake.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for that warm welcome. That was really nice. Unexpected, even.
I love you, Jake.
Yeah. So, my name's Jake Villa. I'm the organizing director at the American Humanist Association, former summer camp director, magician, bartender, all kinds of fun stuff. I'll talk a little bit more about how I grew up, but I grew up 6,000-year-old Earth. I grew up pretty irrational. And so one of my favorite things about being humanist is the rationality side of it and learning things like that on how to continue to grow and improve and ask why and solve that. Anyway, who's familiar with the American Humanist Association before I get into this a little bit? Okay, if you're not familiar with it, I'll give you a little bit of update. We've also got some really cool stuff over there, some QR codes to scan, and then I will start with an apology. My wife has had concert tickets for a very long time for a show tonight, so I cannot stay the whole day. I'll have to bail shortly after this and get back to Milwaukee, where I live, great city up on a Great Lake. Okay, so the AHA is going through a little bit of a transformation in the last year, and I'm really excited to tell you about it and why it's so important at this moment in our history. At the AHA, we spend a lot of time talking about humanism and explaining what humanism is. Just out of curiosity, who's familiar with humanism? A little bit? All right. If you're not familiar with humanism, and I only have a couple of seconds, I will tell you that humanists believe science tells us what's real, and empathy and compassion tell us what's right. It's a belief system for people who believe in the golden rule, but not in God. If I have a little bit longer, I'll tell you that we believe in human dignity and self-determination, that every person has inalienable worth, and that our lives are ours to choose how to live and how to leave with dignity when the time comes. We believe in human potential, that there's no problem we can't solve and no truth we can't discover as long as we protect the freedom to think. And we believe in human responsibility, that our highest obligation is to help our neighbors live lives of freedom and flourishing. What makes a human being worth fighting for isn't an immortal soul or an intelligently designed body, it's consciousness, our ability to reason, our ability to imagine better futures from the infinite canvas of a free mind. These are powerful things to believe in, especially for a group of people that far too often are defined what we don't believe in, right? The reason I believe humanism matters so much right now at this point in history is that it answers a hunger that this country has, a hunger for meaning and for each other in a way that not much is answering right now. So I want to spend some time on an idea today because I think it's the key to kind of everything that we're working on at the American Humanist Association. For those of you who don't know who the AHA is, we've been around since 1941. And so we've been around for almost 90 years. We have people like Kurt Vonnegut, great American author, who was honorary president of the AHA. People like Abraham Maslow was a card-carrying member, and Einstein was part of the movement. And so humanism goes back for a really long time, and we've had some really amazing people as part of it. The last couple of decades, it's been a little bit sleepy. So I'm really excited about what we're doing right now and kind of how things are changing. So you may all know that a huge share of modern psychology was built by humanists. You may not know this, but we'll get into it. If you've ever been to a good therapist, you probably have a humanist to thank for it. Carl Rogers, who founded client-centered therapy, believed that every person comes with an inherent drive towards growth. That people, given the right conditions, naturally move toward becoming their best selves. He gave us the idea that unconditional positive regard, which was a radical notion that you help a person most by accepting them as they are. Abraham Maslow, the hierarchy of needs guy, he put belonging and self-actualization at the very center of what it means to be human. And Dr. Spock, not the one with the pointy ears, but the pediatrician, a best-selling author in American history, he was also an outspoken and open humanist who told a whole generation of parents to trust themselves and to trust their kids. In fact, Rogers and Maslow founded an entire branch of the psychology field. They called it humanistic psychology, the third force, a deliberate alternative to the two schools of psychology that came before it. One of those schools treated people as bundles of repressed urges, right? I think we all know who's famous for that school. The other treated them as machines to be conditioned with rewards and punishments. And the humanists said no. A person is not a problem to be managed or an animal to be trained. A person is the center of dignity and potential, capable of growth and meaning and choice. They built the whole modern human potential movement on that conviction. So the next time someone tells you that humanism is just a fancy word for being an atheist, you can tell them it's also the reason your therapist treats you like a human being. Secular people are constantly told that without God we have no basis for meaning and no anchor for morality, that we're simply adrift. But I think it gets it completely backwards. Humanists don't believe meaning is handed down from on high. We believe that meaning is something that human beings make together out of love and work and the people that we choose to do that with. Our morality doesn't come from fear of punishment or hope of reward. It comes from compassion and reason and the simple recognition that the person next to you matters just as much as you do. It's not a lesser foundation for a good life, but it is a kinder one. So what these shrinks figured out, and what decades of research since has only confirmed, is that two things make a human life go well. The first is self-determination, authoring your own life, living in line with your own values. Our deepest psychological needs are autonomy, competence, and connection to other people. Autonomy is self-determination. Connection is community, what we got going on here today. And they are, as far as science can tell, the load-bearing walls of a flourishing human life. And so when you strip a person of their autonomy, when you tell them that they may not make their own choices about their body, their beliefs, or who to love, you're not just limiting their freedom, you're starving a basic human need. People wither under control and they thrive under self-determination. And humanists have always believed this, and the science has just proven it right. Which brings me to the second thing. The religious right loves to tell us, a wave of study in our faces, showing that religious people are happier. Has anybody seen this study or heard about it? It's a real study. It says that religious people are happier. And every time I've heard that statistic, it makes me scoff a little bit. It makes me a little uncomfortable. It makes me a little annoyed. But when we look closely at the research, it's not as straightforward as they make it appear. The biggest study ever done on this was done by Robert Putnam at Harvard University. He interviewed thousands of people across every faith and asked a simple question. What is it about religion that actually makes people happier? Is it the belief? Is it the prayer? Is it the strength of their faith? And the answer came back, no. None of that predicted life satisfaction. What predicted it was friends. The number of close friends a person had inside their congregation. People with 10 friends at church were twice as satisfied with people with none. So it was never the theology, it was the potlucks. It was the people. That same researcher, Robert Putnam, spent years documenting something else, that Americans have quietly been losing our gathering places for decades. He called it Bowling Alone. Has anybody read this book? It's a great book. It's called Bowling Alone. You should check it out. There's also a documentary called something. It's called, you should check it out. Robert Putnam documentary was on Netflix recently. It's really good. Anyway, he called it Bowling Alone. The leagues, the lodges, the unions, the clubs, the front porches, all the places that used to stitch us together have been thinning out for over a half a century in this country. For a long time, religious congregations were the last exception. They were the one place that an enormous number of Americans still reliably belonged. Which means that as people leave religion in record numbers, we're not only losing a set of beliefs that we've outgrown, we lose the happiness that comes from gathering. We're losing the friends that sat next to us in the pews, we're losing the potlucks, the lasagna deliveries after a loved one dies, and the ease of finding a babysitter that you trust. For millennia, faith groups have evolved into tribal ecosystems that provide support and the happiness that comes with it. And it's not just happiness. The longest study of human life ever conducted, which is the Harvard Study of Adult Development, has been running since 1938. It's followed people across their entire lives to learn what actually keeps us healthy and happy into old age. It's not money, it's not fame, it's not even your cholesterol. The single strongest predictor was the quality of our relationships. Good relationships literally keep us alive longer. The data tells us that what makes a human being thrive is not whether or not they believe in God or supernaturalism, it's whether they have a community and values they share with the people they love. And history teaches us that supernatural beliefs have never had a monopoly on that idea. They've just had more buildings, more guilt, and mandatory tithing. Unfortunately, in 2023, the US Surgeon General issued a formal public health advisory, the same kind of warning that we put on a pack of cigarettes. And the subject was loneliness. He called it an epidemic. An epidemic largely born out of the pandemic that happened right before it, but it isolated us globally unlike any other time in human history. He reported that being chronically disconnected from other people raises your risk of early death by about 30%, which is the same as smoking that pack of cigarettes every day. So I don't know, smoke them if you got them, I guess. Over half of American adults report being lonely, so we are by the numbers starving for connection. One of the saddest parts of that research, though, is that loneliness falls hardest on our youngest generations, Generation Z. They are at one and the same time the least religious generation in American history, and by many measures, the loneliest. So they or their parents walked away from religion for reasons I think many of us in this room understand or did ourselves. But the only replacement that those kids were handed was a palm-sized screen that tickles our dopamine sensors all day and tricks us into thinking we have real connections with internet strangers. They left the gathering buildings, and there was nothing on the other side of the door. There was no potlucks, no youth group laser tag, no congregation of friends, just a phone. And a phone is a really cruel substitute. The more hours a young person spends scrolling, the lonelier the research says they tend to feel. So we have a whole generation handed a device that simulates belonging, raised with very little of the real thing, and a society that tells them they don't really need it a whole lot anyway. It's beyond sad, and it's proving to be really dangerous to our health and their health as a generation, because a human being cannot actually live without belonging. And we can see it in the numbers. Rates of anxiety and depression among teenagers have climbed sharply over the last decade. A generation reporting more distress, more isolation than the one before. But these young people, they're not weak. They're not weak people. I think it's easy for us to think of younger generations as soft. They're largely secular. They're the largest secular generation in history. They're largely accepting of bodily autonomy and people's pronouns and respecting each other. They've been demanding a better work-life balance everywhere they show up to work. And they're queer in higher numbers than any generation previous, with nearly 30% of Generation Z identifying as LGBTQ. Those aren't easy things to do, not with how cantankerous we are as old people, right? But they're doing it, they're showing up. But a void always gets filled, and the question is by what? Right now, a lot of that void is being filled by what we call grievance media. The same online machine that manufactured Charlie Kirk is very good at finding a lonely young person, usually a young man, and handing him an identity, someone to blame, a team to join, and a feeling that he finally matters and belongs. A lot of it leads straight into Christian nationalism, a movement that's actively writing its beliefs into our laws. I don't know if anybody saw, but just yesterday, Texas is now going to have mandatory Bible reading in every grade. Loneliness is the soil that seed grows in, which is exactly why building real, healthy communities isn't a nice to have for the humanist movement, but it has to be our frontline response. The other side is light years ahead of us, and we've got a lot of work to do. But here's what we have that they don't, I think. Humanist community gives people something to believe in, something to belong to, and something to fight for without asking them to distrust their eyes and ears. It's a belief in ourselves and each other for dignity and self-determination, and for a better tomorrow. One of those words, self-determination, means a lot to me because I grew up as a Calvinist. And if you know anything about Calvinism, Calvinists believe in predestination. Self-determination and predestination do not mix and mingle. And so for me, self-determination is one of my favorite things about being a skeptical humanist. Humanist psychology tells us that if self-determination is one of our deepest human needs, which it does, then it can't stop when we get close to the final edge of our life either. Your life is your own when you're choosing what to believe and who to love, and it's still your own at the very end, which is why so many of us also believe in the death with dignity type of loss. As I said, this fight is personal for me. I grew up inside the movement that's driving it, not far away from here. I grew up listening to James Dobson and Rush Limbaugh. I was cruel to my first friend who came out as gay when I was in high school, casting them aside and praying they would find redemption. I was raised to believe that everyone who didn't believe exactly what I believed, including Catholics and Mormons, especially us atheists, were all going to hell, and that it was my job to convert them and to keep them from sinning, no matter the cost to their own personal freedoms. So when I warn about a movement that wants to write our religions into rules, I'm not guessing. I grew up inside of it. Anybody else grow up inside conservative Christianity? It's weird to look back now at the programming and the ideology and see it being enacted decades later. Things that we were talking about in the 90s and the early 2000s being codified into law. I know that world from the inside out, but what finally pulled me out of it wasn't an argument. It was meeting and falling in love with people. Humanists who showed me you could build a whole good life on reason, compassion, and each other without any need for supernatural ideas or imaginary friends. One of those friends, who was a guy named Daniel Barberini from Brazil, he told me one day when I invited him to a Bible study, he said, "Jake, if I touch a Bible, I will burn." But friends like Daniel saved me. They showed me a path out of the shame, the guilt, and the bigotry that I was being fed by the conservative Christian media. And those folks are really good at what they do. They've been building that pipeline and making us afraid of our sinner neighbors, and they've been doing it for a really long time. There's a principle in psychology, though, that you can't beat a negative idea by negating it. You have to replace it with a positive one. And the other side understood this a long time ago. So they took that knowledge and they spent the last few decades and hundreds of millions of dollars building a pipeline to sow fear while offering them a positive solution of belonging once they've created the problem. Charlie Kirk started with $10,000 donation from a Christian mega donor. That was followed by a slew of money into online content. So that when a young person types, "What's the point of life?" into YouTube at 2 a.m., the answer waiting for them is conservative Christianity and an invitation. Come to campus, there's pizza, you'll belong. Content to community to commitment. That's been their playbook since the 80s. And our community has to offer something better. So we started to. Last summer, we launched our own creator fund. Charlie Kirk started with $10,000, but we've been investing $10,000 a month at the AHA into backing online humanist creators. We've partnered with 14 voices so far, and we've reached over 5 million views through those partnerships and the sponsored content that we've put out there. So when someone types, "Is God real?" or "What's my purpose?" they can find a person offering reason and compassion and real hope instead of grievance. We launched a podcast. I listened to it on my drive over here. It's called How to Humanist. And it's reached listeners in more than 48 countries in its first 2 months. There's only 19 episodes out so far. In the podcast, our communications manager, her name is Shay Leonia, is an elder millennial. She's in her late 30s, early 40s, and she's on a journey of discovering she's a humanist and what that means. It's a brilliant podcast for both new and old humanists. It's got names you know, like Greg Epstein, humanist Harvard chaplain, and a lot of people who you probably don't know, but you want to get to know better. According to the research we've done, based on the growing percentage of nuns in America, and we did a huge study last year across the country, we believe there's around 44 million unconscious humanists in America. People who are already humanists and have just never heard the word. In fact, when you look at Google search trends, which is how Google tracks words, the word humanism spikes every August. Anybody have any ideas on why?
You told me.
Because I told you. It's because kids are going back to college and they're hearing the word for the first time in a psychology class or a philosophy class. And they go, "What is this humanism thing?" Right? So we think there's 44 million unconscious humanists in America who have just never heard the word. Shay, the podcast host, she was one of them. She didn't know she was a humanist. She grew up Jewish, but didn't believe in supernaturalism. She didn't know she was a humanist until she saw the job posting. She applied for the job, she didn't get it. Then she applied for the next job because by that point she was like, "No, this is who I am and this is what I want to do." So, and we keep hearing that same sentiment across our social media channels, which are doing 400% engagement over last year. So what we're doing is working. It's getting out there and people are starting to engage with us. These initiatives, along with other ones, are really working. This past February, we saw a 52% increase in new members and donors than the year before. A lot of them young, and a lot of those people didn't know they were humanists before they stumbled across one of those videos, something like our podcast or one of the advertisements that we're doing. Content's only the front door, though. It's one thing to get views, it's another thing to invite them into something, right? Because the problem is belonging, the problem is friends. So how do we get those views and convert them into groups of people that meet together? So this fall, and to be clear as well, I'm the organizing director, so I run the organizing department. That department didn't exist 2 years ago. The AHA, in all of its history, we've always had local community groups like Prairie State Humanist that meets here at this facility. We've had those for decades, but we never had a function at our organization that supported that movement, the local gathering movement. So I'm the first director in this role, and we're building out a ton of resources and support to help build better communities. This fall, we're launching a Young Humanist Community program in 5 pilot cities around the country. And it's built specifically to answer that loneliness epidemic with real in-person belonging for the most secular generation in history. We'll be kicking off those events with help from our influencer creator friends. And our interns and Gen Z staff are the ones building this. So a Gen Z program built by Gen Z humanists for Gen Z humanists, being launched with the help of Gen Z humanists. And for a young person who sees their lonely friends getting taken by far-right talking points, this community can offer something different. It's a place to bring your questions, your grief, your joy, and not be handed a pocket Bible when you get there. mentors for young people, learning how to be good without God, and friends, actual friends, the kind that the Harvard study tells us they really need, that'll keep them healthy and happy at 80. So that's what we're trying to build deliberately, city by city, because the most secular generation in history should not also have to be the loneliest. It really bums me out that those two things are hand in hand right now. Thankfully, a lot of this work has already been done, many by people like you in the room. So this past year, we added 30 new humanist chapters around the country. We're supporting more than 800 local group leaders like Scott, with trainings and tools, a dedicated organizing team in this department that didn't exist before. One of our brand new groups that launched last year in Biloxi, Mississippi, Deep Red Biloxi, they've grown over 400% in just the past year. They're majority millennial and younger. They're running multiple sold out events a month, and they're growing like weeds in the Mississippi sun. This past spring, on May 2nd, we ran what was called the American Empathy Project, because we were tired of people like Elon calling empathy a sin. We said no, empathy is what makes us great. The goal was to put $100,000 directly into the hands of local organizers to reach humanists who didn't know they were humanist. And it worked. 70% of the grantees that we worked with had never heard of the American Humanist Association or had worked with us before. And time after time in the applications, it said, I didn't know I was a humanist until I read this. This is what I've been doing for decades. They work at secular organizations. By secular, I mean organizations that have no definition of religion. They're not doing it because they're religious. They're doing it because it's the right thing to do and their community needs that. One of the organizations that we proudly sponsored was Chicago Street Medicine, who works out with our homeless population in downtown Chicago, providing medicine because they need it. It's the right thing to do. The American Empathy Project supported 101 service projects. We brought out 1,800 volunteers. We helped more than 20,000 neighbors. We showed whole communities what it means to be good without gods. Our community is really there for the happy and the sad days. So if you've never heard of humanism before, you might not know that we have humanist chaplains and humanist celebrants. They're serving in prisons and hospitals. You can get married by a humanist. And they're recognized by the same bodies that credential religious chaplains. They said, like I said, with people in hospitals and hospices and at the bedside. So no one has to face the end of their life with a faith pressed on them that they never held. In Grand Rapids, Michigan, the Michigan Humanist Group, they've been sitting at a local interfaith table for the last 20 years to be the secular voice among the clergy in central Michigan. That trust helped them get the opportunity to bring every hospice in the area into one room to teach those hospice leaders how to actually comfort a dying secular person who doesn't share their faith. The results have shown that the staff have changed the way they talk to people in their care. They're no longer trying to impose, hey, let's pray together when you're at the end of your life, right? Like, I don't know about you, but as now a very devout secular person, that would really piss me off as one of the last things I would get to hear on this planet. So while we're building, we're also defending. Again, if you don't know the AHA, we also have a legal team. We have a legal department, and we have a legal director. In this past year, we won more court victories than any time in AHA history. We beat the state of Arkansas in federal court over a Ten Commandments monument, and then alongside the ACLU in West Virginia, we stopped the state of West Virginia from trying to funnel $5 million into a Catholic college in Ohio from their water fund, which was crazy. We stopped a Florida city from spending tax dollars on a Christian prayer vigil, and we helped an elementary school in Texas take down scripture off its walls. I'm sure we will be doing work on this reading Bible in class thing that just happened as well. We're not a large organization though. We have about $4 million if we stand on our tippy toes. Along with all of the secular organizations in what's called the Secular Coalition of America, which is organizations like the American Humanist Association, Freedom from Religion Foundation, CFI, American Atheists, Secular Student Alliance. Collectively, we only have about $35 million against billions on the other side. But we're beating those states and we're beating those people in courts because the Constitution of America is about the right of every American to freedom of conscience. So every bit of this, the lawyers, the organizers, the creators, the chaplains, like I said, we do on a budget smaller than a single megachurch. And we're badly outspent. But we're not outmatched because we have the one thing that all the money on the other side can't manufacture. We're telling people to trust themselves, their eyes and their ears and their ability to reason. And we're giving them somewhere real to belong. The writer Anne Lamott said there are only two prayers. Thank you, thank you, thank you, and help me, help me, help me. I'm not much of a praying man anymore, but I'm going to say both of those things. So thank you. Thanks for coming out today. Thanks for being part of a community at a moment when all of the loudest voices really want you to stay home and doom scroll alone. Coming here is a quietly radical act. And as we've learned, the research says it might just make you live a little bit longer. The other prayer is help us. I've told you about the estimated 40 million humanists who just don't know they're humanists. So talk about your humanism and share that you're a proud member, if you are, of the AHA. Your support pays for all the stuff I talked about. But more than that, I don't know, it's those moments of meeting somebody who said, I didn't know I was this thing, but this is what, like, I didn't know there was a community to belong to. I didn't know there was a belief system that I thought I was alone, right? And so it's really important that we talk about what we believe and that we help people find the resources and the tools in the community that will accept them for who they are. I think for a lot of us, especially those of us who left religion, we lost everything, right? I talk to my parents once a year. I lost all of my high school friends. And so finding humanism and finding this community, it meant more to me than words can really say. And I think that's true for a lot of people who found humanism. Listen to the How to Humanist podcast. It's available on all your favorite podcast apps. I think it's really fantastic. Sign up for our newsletters. I have the QR codes over there. Please take some stickers, throw them on your water bottles. And most importantly, before you leave this room, please introduce yourself to someone you haven't met before, because community is what makes us stronger. I want to be clear about what we're not asking for, though. We're not fighting for a country where everyone believes the same way that we do. George Washington, who was a very devout Christian, he wrote to a Jewish congregation in Rhode Island that the United States gives to bigotry no sanction, to persecution no assistance, and asks only that people be good citizens. We don't want to squash down anyone else's faith. We just want a country where every single person is met with dignity and the equal rights we've always believed that they have. One of our founders, John Dietrich, put it like this: humanists do not put our faith in the power of gods, we put it in the power of people, the collective power of intelligent, caring people working together. The loneliness, the cruelty, the control that we see on all of the media every day, none of it's inevitable and none of it is unstoppable. In fact, beating it takes exactly the thing that humanists are best at building, which is people who believe in one another and our potential to do good, to make a kinder, more equitable tomorrow than yesterday. So that's the work we've been up to at the AHA. Thanks for being here. Thanks for being humanist. Thanks for hanging out. Thanks for coming out. Yeah, that was me. Questions? Thanks.
Do any of the humanist chapters have a, for lack of a better word, church?
Yeah, actually, you're sitting across here from Charlie. So Charlie is up in Evanston, Skokie. And they have a building not unlike this one. And they meet every Sunday morning up in Skokie. We also, has anybody heard of the movement Sunday Assembly?
I've heard of it.
Sunday Assembly has around a dozen places around the country. They're all affiliates of ours as well. There's another group called the Oasis Network. They have some church buildings. And then there's a movement that predates the American Humanist Association called the American Ethical Union. And they have quite a few church buildings as well. And then there's places like Norway, unexpectedly super humanist, something like, or Northern Ireland, something like 1 in 7 marriages in Northern Ireland are humanist now. So other countries outside of America, humanism has a little bit more of that kind of pastoral care and ritual built into it. And it's something that we kind of lost over the last couple decades, but it's something that's kind of coming back into humanism a bit. Yeah.
The son is left college, and how does he go about finding the room? Do you have a database of groups?
Yeah. So most of the college work being done in the secular space is being done by the Secular Student Alliance, who's one of our partners. So there's a good chance that there's already an SSA group on his campus, but if there's not, they'll give all kinds of support and tools on how to start one.
They have their own website.
They have their own website, Secular Student Alliance. Yeah, yeah, they're a great org that we work closely with for campus work. Our Young Humanist project is mostly, it's focused on that 18 to 35 kind of age demographic. Most of our communities are 60 plus around the country. And for this program that we're launching in the fall, we're not specifically targeting campus program, but we're targeting that age demographic, especially folks who get out of college and then don't have a group, a belonging. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. Ivan.
You talked about like religious groups say, we'll give you free pizza. I'm wondering, like, do you have research on like what kinds of things work?
Yeah, nobody likes anchovies. People really like cheese. There's a lot of research been done about cheese as well.
Is it real?
The cheese
Yeah.
research?
No, is cheese real?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think, I just think back on my own childhood, right? And so I grew up, I was in church 6 days a week or whatever. But the things that I remember most weren't the sermons, they were laser tag. They were the community aspect of it, right? And so our groups that are growing fastest are the ones that are most focused on community building and relationship building, and helping people find connection. There's a huge desire for young family-aged programming. You have a kid for the first time and you don't have anywhere to go but church to find other young parents. And so that's a big space that we are trying to work into as well. But the problem is kind of it's that chicken and egg situation. Like if people don't know they're humanists and they've never heard the word before, they're not gonna look for it, right? And a lot of the younger generations, unless they've deconstructed, they don't consider themselves atheists. Like they don't use that word because it's just never been a thing for them. And so their association with atheism is kind of this not such a nice picture that's been painted over the last couple of decades of argumentative and grumpy, right? And so, yeah, so that's why we're doing so much work as well about trying to kind of promote humanism as a label or as a identity, because then they can connect that with, oh, this is something I believe in, not something I don't believe. And that positive thing is what a lot of the younger generations are really trying to go after. So our fastest growing groups are the ones that, like Humanists in Minnesota and Minneapolis. Like if you go to their website, I don't even know, like it's all pro value stuff. It's all positive value oriented kind of language. Yeah.
I know I've gotten emails from you about trying to build something in the Chicago area.
Yeah.
Is that also for like the youth or
Yeah, 100%.
people my age?
Yeah. So I think because we've never had an organized element at the national level, all these groups have just kind of sprung up over time, right? And it'll be somebody like here in DuPage who's like, oh, I need friends, but I'm not going to drive to Skokie every week, right? And so all of our groups have kind of independently started, and now we're trying to do some bigger projects. Like one of our biggest groups is the Central Florida Free Thought Community. And so they're kind of across that whole band of Orlando, if you were just to draw 2 arrows coast to coast in Florida, they have an event in that band every single day of the month, sometimes 2 or more a day. And so they've kind of coalesced as a larger community in that Central Florida space. And that means that they've been able to cut down on admin costs, they've been able to cut down on different websites and the confusion of that. And so we're trying to kind of rebuild our community elements from scratch. We're also rebuilding the AHA's website, which is 20 years old, which is not a great thing to have. We believe in evolution, so our website should evolve. So we've got a new website coming out at the end of August, which is going to really point people towards finding a local group, because it is, like I said, it's not just a fun speech. Like it is a priority for us to build community, because without it, we don't have a collective voice, right? And so many people, like our communications director, Court worked for the Wisconsin Dems and was the communications person for the Wisconsin Democratic Party. Court left that role because they became so disillusioned with the difference between what the party said and what the party did, right? I think there's a lot of people who have put their faith in a political party because they are for values that are being championed by that party, but then they continuously see that party not live up to those values. We think humanism is the right fit for a lot of those people who are attracted to that kind of progressive stuff, but they're putting their faith in politicians instead of their neighbors. And so we're doing a lot of work in that space. Yep.
So I'm just getting confused. So you cleared up a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
Especially like that science tells us what is real, cash tells us what is right.
Yeah.
But like the American Atheist Society says they're humans.
Yep.
And then the Satanic Temple says they're humans.
Yep.
So when you were getting when you said that those are they're coalitions, what is the overarching, how does this, I'm trying to get my mind around, there's so many different groups.
Yeah, it's a great question. We have a magazine called The Humanist that has been published regularly since 1933 or something. So it even predates the American Humanist Association. And I have a copy on my desk of the best of the Humanist from like 1933 to 1975. And right at the beginning of chapter 2, it says types of humanism. And there's like 15 things in there. And this is from like 1930. And it's like transhumanism, neo-humanism, secular humanism, like all these different humanisms. Anyway, humanism evolves. It changes over time. I would say that TST, Satanic Temple, American Atheists are, that those people who are running those organizations identify as humanist. They consider their organizations to be humanist organizations. The tenets of Satanic Temple are largely humanist tenets in terms of like they are pro-value, pro-self-determination, pro-autonomy. But those organizations, the history of the secular world is really interesting because every organization that exists right now, almost all of them split off of the American Humanist Association at some point in history. So like Center for Inquiry was started by Paul Kurtz, who was the editor of the Humanist magazine for a long time before he left and went and started Scientific Inquiry, which led to CFI and all this kind of other stuff. So there's been a lot of fragmenting in the secular movement, which has also not helped us very much grow, because we've spent a lot of time arguing amongst ourselves instead of proactively marketing a belief system that says, hey, you're not a worthless sinner. You are capable of good, and you can help us make tomorrow better.
The SCA's kind of,
Yeah, so there's a kind of a organization called the Secular Coalition of America. You go to their website, there's about 20 different partner organizations that we've all agreed, like, hey, we're gonna work together to try to make tomorrow better, so.
All right, I think we can take one more question if there's anybody. Okay.
Yeah, hi.
So you kind of touched on it, resources and money. So like Charlie Kirk got $10,000, and I would argue that, what really like brought him to more people was his death. I didn't know who he was before he was.
Listen, I'm not volunteering to die today, okay? So,
Right. No, so I'm just saying resources. So
That's
the
terrible.
Mormon Church, well, they're not called Mormons anymore. The Church of Latter-day Saints.
Yeah.
I just looked it up. They said they have about 7 million members in the U.S. So they're potentially
Yeah.
market for humans is much larger, but they have a lot of political power. They also have a lot of businesses that don't directly tie into their religion.
I lived in Salt Lake for 6.5 years before I moved to Wisconsin, so I personally, like the entire mall in downtown Salt Lake City is owned by the church, which is an insane thing to say.
My daughter's dorm rooms in downstate Illinois, all of the apartments in the town are owned by 2 Mormon corporations.
Yeah, they are really good at that. So from our political side of things and the influence that we're trying to build on the political side, I work for the American Humanist Association, which is a 501c3 educational organization. We also have a 501c4, which is a political organization. It's called the Center for Free Thought Equality. There's a QR code over there and a flyer that you can take. Joining CFE is completely free. The Center for Free Thought Equality, completely free. Please scan it, please join the CFE, please get emails from the political team. Because of the rules about the differences between C3s and C4s, I'm not a Christian pastor, so I'm not gonna break those rules. But the Johnson Amendment says I can't really talk about a lot of the work that C4 is doing. But I will tell you that on the C4 side, we run what's called the Congressional Free Thought Caucus. And it just this year has become bigger than the Freedom Caucus, which is the hardcore religious right caucus. So that caucus is run by Jamie Raskin and Jared Huffman, one of whom is a humanist, one who I think the other one's an agnostic. But there's 30 plus people in there now fighting for separation of church and state. And it's our policy team that does a lot of the work on that. And so we have, and our office is in DC, just a couple of blocks from the White House. So we do a lot of policy work. The C4 side has a PAC, and we support candidates. We also, on that side, have the Association of Secularly Elected Officials. So if you're ever running for office and you want to get support from peers, you can sign up for that as well. But we are trying to do this work. And then things like the Creator Fund are that was an idea that at the conference last year in Chicago, we said, we want to do this thing. And there was a person in the room who came up to us and said, how much to make this real? And we said $120,000 for a year, and he's been giving us $10K a month ever since. And so I think that, 30% of the country is non-religious. Like 30% of the country has money. They just don't know humanism is a thing, and they don't know what we're fighting for. So we need your help to talk about it.